topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you because this is a special time of the whole week, which I always look forward to. So I want to share a very quick story with you. So someone from our audience reached out and shared their kindness story with us. What they shared was like they saw in the neighbor's yard some people working. It was very hot. And as she observed, it seemed like they had water, but it was probably not cold. It didn't seem like they had a cooler. So what she did was she took a big bucket of ice and some cold water and gave it to them. And what Leslie shared that the smiles on their faces were just amazing. So folks, when we talk about kindness, you can perform kindness anywhere, anyhow. You don't need money, you don't need time, you don't need to spend energy. It can be little actions, and every little action counts. And thank you for each and every one who has got our books, especially Expert to Entrepreneur, The Entrepreneur's Garden, and Expert to Influencer, because they are not only going to help you in your personal life, they're going to accelerate your career and your business. And also, the partial profits from our book sales go to kiva.org, and we help entrepreneurs all across the globe. So let's bring in our guest, James Burstall.
Hi.
Good to have you, James.
It's wonderful to be here with you in North Carolina. And in fact, in the book that we're going to be talking about in a moment, I have some wonderful interviewees from North Carolina. So I know your state well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So do you remember, even to this day, any moment from your childhood that left a mark on you?
Well, I mean, our childhoods are very, very important. The way we are brought up and where we're brought up and by whom, of course, impacts us for the rest of our lives. And I had many blessings when I grew up. I grew up in London, in the UK. My mum and dad did work very hard to make sure that we had a roof over our heads and there was food on the table, and I had a good education. But also, our childhoods can be impactful. My dad had some emotional issues. My dad was an alcoholic, and he struggled with addiction, and my mum was embroiled with that. And you know what? I actually bless the complexity of that upbringing, because it meant that I had to, and my two sisters, I have two older sisters, one in New York and one in London. We all three had to grapple with complexity from a very young age. And, some people that can make it can break you. It can, be very damaging for a future life. But actually, in our instance, I think it really helped us to see that there is much good in the world. The world is not perfect, but that when you are resilient and you focus on kindness and you do work hard and you surround yourself with good, kind people and do a lot of work, I've done a lot of work on myself, then you can come out a fitter, stronger person. So I do actually believe that adversity is sent there as a gift to allow us to become stronger as people.
Mm, that is so powerful. And the point that you made, that complexities of the adversities had an opposite effect on you, because so many people end up blaming their parents, blaming their childhood, and then they continue that cycle, and that cycle is not broken. In your case, you all took it in such a beautiful way and broke that cycle. So that's so powerful. So as you grew up, where were your interests?
Well, I was always very good at foreign languages because I love communication. And I know that for you, emotional intelligence is such an important life skill. And I think now back, why did I want to learn foreign languages? I speak French, German, Spanish, Italian, English, obviously, and a little bit of Mandarin. And I realized that I wanted to understand how other people think and how other cultures work. Because, you know, we who grew up in these very multicultural societies, the UK, the US, we obviously are impacted by cultures from all over the world. And I think that it is that blended DNA that makes us so strong. So my grandfather was French, for example. I have family from Scotland and from Northern Ireland, but also my sister now lives in New York and her husband is from Armenia. They are an American family with obviously very different roots from many parts of the world. And I love this interchange of cultures because I think it is so enriching. So I decided to learn foreign languages as a kid. And I realize now because I wanted to learn about how different people think and work, because nobody has all the right answers. And we are always students. I'm constantly learning. And I love it when I go to a different country and there's a different way of thinking, a different belief system, a different way to show that you care for somebody, a different way to show respect. And we have to be mindful of other people's customs. And I love that. That's what makes the world so rich.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating to learn about other cultures, because it's one thing is at the core that binds all humans together: the desire to be happy, the desire to give better to your kids, the desire to have that family. And they're just different ways of doing that. So when we look at other cultures, it's not only it opens up our mind, but it also gives us so many different perspectives to understand other people. So where did your career first take you, James?
Well, I went to university based in the UK, but as part of my degree, I went to study for 6 months in Munich in Germany, and then 6 months in Paris to obviously practice my German and my French, which was at the time quite scary actually, because I was 17 and moving to a foreign country and thrown into this complete foreign language environment where I basically had to sink or swim. So that was certainly a good way to grow up pretty fast. But I fell in love with both countries, but particularly Paris. And so when I went back to my UK university for one more year to get my final degree, and then I was writing letters to everybody on the planet to see if I could get a job. I thought I wanted to become a journalist because I love storytelling. I've always been passionate about good stories. So I wrote to lots of people, and this is one of my beliefs in life: if you don't ask, you don't get. And you have to accept that you will get many rejections. And I wrote probably several hundred letters and probably got at least 100 rejections. And many people didn't even respond to me. But one magazine in Paris is an American magazine called Paris Passion, a little bit like Time Out now. They wrote back to me and said, listen, we don't have very much money, but we'd love to take you on as an editorial assistant. Will you move to Paris, please? And we'll pay you, a couple of dollars a week. I mean, if it's virtually no money, but that was okay. I got other jobs on the side, bar stuff and wait stuff and what have you. And then on the back of that, I was very fortunate because I was in Paris and young and willing, frankly, to do anything. If they clicked their fingers and said, will you go to Vienna this afternoon? I'd say, of course, where's the plane? Then Tina Brown and Anna Wintour and Harold Evans, who are three amazing journalists, British journalists, all based in New York. Tina Brown was running Vanity Fair, Anna Wintour running Vogue, and Harold Evans running Condé Nast Traveler. They all started to employ me to write stories and do research on different kinds of articles for them. So I was, hopping all around Europe doing 1 minute an investigation into Gorbachev, the next minute a story about the Gypsy Kings, who were a band that were just kind of breaking out at the time. This is in the early 90s. And I carried on working as a journalist for those amazing publications for a few years between London, Paris, and New York, but mostly based in Paris. And then I came back to London after a little bit because I wanted to be in the head office, work for some newspapers. And then I thought, actually, you know what? I don't want to continue to work in black and white. I'd like to move into visual sequences, working in a team, working in color, working with music. And of course, that for me meant television. So I applied for a job and they said, well, listen, there is this kind of cool new youth network on the BBC. It's based in Manchester, which at the time was a very, very hip city. We will cut your salary in half, but we'll put you on screen. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to move from Paris to London to Manchester, which I didn't really know much about. And I'm going to cut my salary in half, but I'm going to be on TV. So it was a no-brainer. I said yes, of course. And from there on, I've started a 25-year career in television, and it was absolutely the right move. But again, I do think that, you have to make bold decisions in your career. You have to be very flexible in your thinking. You have to be willing, especially when you're young. And I had no responsibilities. I had no family. I had no mortgage. Obviously, I was in my mid-20s at that point. But you have to be willing to think outside the box, think laterally. And when opportunities come your way, obviously evaluate the landscape. But if it seems like this could open incredible new doors, even if it means taking a giant cut in your salary, then you must do it. And I'm so grateful that I did. It was the right decision.
You bring up such a great point. And of course, your premise is flexible leadership anyway. So you're talking about taking leadership even in your personal life. And when you lead yourself, 2 or 3 things that are standing out for me from your story is, 1, you are definitely not afraid of rejection. So anyone, regardless whether they're an entrepreneur or youngsters or even people who are transitioning out, it's super important to face rejections and be able, because I've so many clients who will be like, oh, I need to negotiate salary. I'm not going to take that opportunity. I need 20% jump. And they lose out on so many different opportunities just because of money. So what would you tell them?
I think at the heart, you really have to know that you have a voice, that you have a value, that you merit the place that you inhabit on the earth. And nobody can take that away from you. And we all suffer rejection, and we all have people who don't agree with us, or people who don't like us, or people who are not prepared to value us, whether it's in our professional or our personal world. And that can be painful. Life at times can be painful. That's just part of the course, unfortunately. That is what it is to be a human being. But if we can always hold on to the fact that, I'm a good person. I've got a clear conscience. I believe in good and wrong, actually, good and bad. I do have a strong sense of justice. I have a strong sense of fairness. And I do have very good self-esteem. I know, I do believe in God. But that is something that has come and gone over the years, I have to say. But I do believe that there is a higher power in the universe, and that we are put here for a reason. And I believe that I was dealt a set of cards when I was born, and that those sets of cards are to be the best son and brother and friend that I possibly can be. I don't have children, but I have 6 nephews and nieces, and I have 4 godchildren, and I try to be the best uncle that I possibly can be. And I try to be a role model in my business. The kind of behaviors that we model, they matter. Leadership comes from the top. So I do believe strongly that we can influence the world that we live in, albeit the small world. I can't influence the whole world, but my little world, I can try to offer a place where people are valued, where talent is looked after. I set up my company 20 years ago, Leopard Films, which was my first company, because I wanted people to know that they would come to a work environment where their creativity was going to be nurtured and looked after, not bullied. I have worked for bullying bosses, and bullying bosses who made me feel bad because they were driving the bottom line, and they thought that by kind of whipping me and my colleagues, they thought they would maybe get more out of us, perhaps. I don't know, weird mentality. That's so not how I think. So when I set up my company, I knew I wanted to create a very positive, inclusive culture. Diversity, inclusiveness, kindness are absolutely at the heart of our DNA. It's absolutely critical. So what does the impact have? Well, of course, it makes it a happier working environment. It, in my opinion, makes people do better work because we empower people to do their best work. And there is compelling evidence from in the Harvard Business Review that a happy culture means a happy team. It has a direct impact on your bottom line. You make more money. And, my business is successful. We have a great team of people. We have many people who stay with us for many, many years. And we have new people coming in all the time as well. It's a good mix. And we make good money. So it's kind of win-win.
So tell us about the transition. You mentioned that you started a company. And what made you decide going and starting your company rather than going and working for someone else?
Well, I did work for 10 different companies from the ages of 25 to the ages of 35. And I had some incredible experiences. I was producing and directing television documentaries and investigative programming and going all over the world. For example, I traveled all over Africa. I traveled all over Southeast Asia. I traveled a lot in the United States, all over continental Europe. And, that was amazing. And I was being paid to do that. So what an incredible privilege. But, I got to my mid-30s and I thought, I don't particularly want to live any longer out of a suitcase. I do want to have a life partnership and I'd like to have a home. So that became very important to me. I did then go to work in the office, developing and selling programs for 2 different companies. So my dog is making a bit of a squeaking noise. Is that a problem? Minnie. Sorry, my dog's getting a bit excited in the background. I'm trying to calm her down. It's okay.
Oh, you can bring your dog in the show as well. Like everyone's welcome.
This is Minnie. She's a cocker spaniel.
Minnie.
I'll put her down. She's okay. I have 2 cocker spaniels. So I went to work for 2 different companies. One who were very big in the United States, and I wanted to do more business in the US. And the other who were very good at producing documentaries, and I wanted to do more documentary work. And I learned on both occasions that I was able to develop ideas and sell them. So I was a good producer, creator, and salesperson. On both occasions, after a year, I was able to say to my bosses, listen, I brought in $1 million of business in my first year working for you. Now, can you give me some stock in your company? And on both occasions, they said to me, no, in maybe 3 or 4 years' time. And I said, well, listen, I'm 35. And then the next time I was 36. I said, I can't wait 3 or 4 years. I'm going to be knocking 40. So, I've proved what I can do and I want to do more and I want to do it for you. But you do need to make me a partner in even just a small way in your business. And I did have to be tough. And I said, well, listen, if you don't do this, I will have to leave. And on both occasions, they stood their ground. They said, no, we're not going to do this. Not now, maybe in the future. In some unspecified time frame. So I left and I had to leave. And again, I would say this to everybody, you give people a chance and you give them a second chance and a third chance and you talk fairly and openly and you have a dialogue. If at the end of the day, the people you're talking to will not listen, that's their choice. But you can't just sit around and be treated like a second-class citizen or feel undervalued. My self-esteem wouldn't permit that of me. And also my business career, I couldn't just keep working for other people and not getting the benefit forever. So really, having done it twice, I thought I can't do it a third time. Now I really do have to set up on my own. So I touted around the industry in the UK and the US looking for partners. I always worked 50% UK, US in my television career. And there was a company who said, listen, we will back you in your own business. And that was really the beginning. And I never looked back. But that DNA at the heart of my business, which is value people, look after them, make them feel precious, because the people are the lifeblood of any company. I made my people feel valued, and I myself, know that is what works. And as a result, do have a very successful international business.
Congratulations. So one of the things I want to ask you is that since you experienced both in the journalism and TV shows, what would you say were the 5 critical lessons that you brought with you that helped you in your business?
Well, funny enough, I've tried to outline them in my book. Here we go, little plug. The flexible method, which is published in the US and the UK. It's available on Amazon. And the flexible method, I wrote it coming out of COVID because I wanted to put down in writing a number of lessons, and there are 16 lessons in this book, about how to survive any crisis and come out on top. Because my company, like all of us, and so many of your listeners today will know just how painful it was. We all have our war wounds. COVID was really, really brutal and really challenged us and pushed us to the limit. But also there are many incredible people around the world, leaders running teams, running businesses, some of them in multinationals, some of them in SMEs. There are people all around the world who demonstrated tremendous courage and thoughtful, flexible thinking. And I wanted to put it in writing so that when the next generation comes along and they have the next big crisis, they can turn to this book, and I hope it will be a useful tool. I certainly at the beginning of COVID felt like, how are we going to get through this? What are the solutions? What is the methodology? But I hope now, and there will be others, that there is at least one book, my book, The Flexible Method, where people can reach and go, you know what, this generation, my generation, we did it. We came out with our war wounds, but nonetheless we survived. So maybe we can do it again in the future. So in terms of the single most, if I had to pick 5, well, certainly putting your people first is absolutely critical. Emotional intelligence, relationships, compassion for your people is at the heart of any business. So people, that would be my absolute top one. My next is lead with calm purpose. It's very important that we model calmness and confidence. I believe in being authentic. As a leader, you have to be authentic. So in the middle of COVID, I didn't tell my people, oh, it's all going to be fine, there won't be any problems. I was honest. I said, we don't have all the answers. And, there are people getting sick, and some of nobody actually in my team, but some of their loved ones did die. We had to be honest about that. It was really brutal. But at the same time, we were able to say, the management team have got your back. We are here for you. We will find the solution together. So hang in there. Don't do anything rash. If you're worried, we've got support for you. Talk, reach out. We will get through this. And of course, we did get through it. So lead with calm purpose is absolutely essential. And next, I think, would be gather your generals. You cannot do this on your own. It is a sign of weakness, in my opinion, if you think you can do all this on your own. Reaching out and saying, I don't have all the answers. Yeah, I'm sitting in the chief executive seat. I'm human. I don't have all the answers. But surrounding me are some incredibly brilliant people who have sometimes ideas which are the same as mine, and sometimes ideas which are fundamentally different, and they will challenge me. So when you gather your generals, and I set up a group, an emergency team at the beginning of COVID, where I had 5 people, a small team, but from different parts of the organization, operations, HR, commercial, etc. And these people are not yes people. These are people who tell me the truth. And sometimes it's the truth I do not want to hear. And that can be tough, because they would say to me things, James, this is really painful. You're not going to want to hear this. But actually, I think X or Y or Z. And I would go away and think about it. And sometimes I'd go, yeah, maybe, but maybe we can just soften that a bit. And other times I would go, you know what, you're right. We do have to do that. And thank you for holding up a mirror, because a leader needs people to hold up a mirror.
So, James, before we continue on the next lessons, let me ask you this. So many of my clients will come and say that we see what's obvious, what's wrong with the system. And yet when we go and approach executive team, and this is, some CPOs, CFOs, or even VPs and directors, they're not open to listening. And I'm not saying that's the case for all companies, but there are quite a few. What can leaders do when your leadership team doesn't listen? How can they present any tips or tricks?
Well, gosh, working with a brick wall is impossible. You can't stick around. I mean, I have worked for brick walls in my life, and I have friends, and recently my nephew, who I'm very close to, working for a brick wall. There comes a point when you just have to leave. But that's the end point. We don't want to go there too often. Listening is again one of the single most important leadership skills. And I think one of the things perhaps to hold in our mind is that this idea of a sort of supreme macho leader, and that could be a man or a woman, is, I think, completely not fit for purpose. Because expecting one individual to just give top-down directives is totally unrealistic. One human being can have all the answers for a big, complex ecosystem, which is a business, especially buffeting in the winds that we now live in. We live now in a time of permacrisis, whether it's inflation or interest rates going sky high, or the threat of recession, or the Ukraine, or COVID, or all the other things, the crises that we've lived through the last 20 years, and there will be others. Climate change, goodness me. All of these threats that are now coming at us left, right, and center, not one after the other, but simultaneously. To expect one person to have all the answers to all of that is just crazy. So I think one of the things that we have to do, and I've definitely done that in my business, and increasingly, I do see this in the media and in other businesses too. The idea of a kind of machismo top-down leader is really not fit for purpose. So I think we need to foster within the culture of our businesses a sense that positive, constructive feedback is built into the DNA. So you put systems in place where there is that opportunity for feedback, and also an opportunity for people to be able to share different ideas, which may not be necessarily that are currently in the business plan, if you like. So maybe create opportunities. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once every 6 months, kind of blue sky opportunities where groups can get together and say, we're doing things this way, but how about if we try it that way? Another important opportunity is when new people start, especially new people in big jobs. The first 100 days of that person being in that new role, they will be bringing all of the experience and expertise from their previous company. And many of the things from that previous company will be helpful. Some of them may be new. So it behoves us to make sure that when somebody new arrives, we give them an opportunity to share with us the systems that they were used to working with in their previous employment environment, so that they can bring them to us and we can then review them and think, well, actually, that is a good idea. We don't do that. Why don't we try it? To give it an opportunity to be tested out. So yeah, listening is absolutely critical. And if we don't listen, we miss so many opportunities, and our businesses are much, much weaker as a result.
Some really good, solid points there. So going back to your company, do share like what your company does and how you've implemented all these leadership principles in your culture.
Yeah, so I run an independent media production group. We produce shows. And we produce shows for all the different platforms, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, Snapchat, Discovery, Nat Geo, History Channel, HGTV, many, many networks all over the US. Also in the UK, the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, Sky, etc. So we produce content across all the genres. So we produce short form entertainment content for Snapchat. We produce long form documentaries with David Attenborough, for example, about mammoths and ancient history and the natural world. We produce investigations. So we do investigative work with the New York Times, primarily looking at miscreants and criminals. And we've done quite a lot. We've exposed quite a lot of criminal behavior. We do very joyful reality programming, such as House Hunters International, which is on HGTV almost every night. It's a very warm, engaging property show, traveling around the world. We do shows about space. Strip the Cosmos is a huge show. We do shows about engineering. Mysteries of the Abandoned is the top show on Discovery Science. And we produce entertainment shows such as The Masked Singer. You may see the iteration on Fox. We produce it for the UK for ITV. It's a big celebrity entertainment singing show on a Saturday night. And we also do scripted comedy. So we've recently just got a show on Netflix called Hard Sell, with a very engaging British comedian called Catherine Tate, set in a women's prison. So it's like Orange is the New Black, but very funny.
I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, so that's what we do. And our headquarters is in London, and we have offices in New York, Los Angeles, Liverpool, and Glasgow.
So it sounds like you must have quite a few employees. And what would you say is your culture? Like, if you were to describe it in a few sentences.
Well, definitely people first. We are known to be a very holistic business where emotional intelligence is at the heart of what we do. We're a creative business. People are putting their heart on their sleeve when they reveal themselves in the creative endeavor. It's tough. And sometimes things are a huge hit and they win an Oscar. And sometimes things absolutely bomb and it's devastating. You know, that's the nature of the creative endeavor. So we have to care for our people. And also the people who support them, the financiers and the commercial people and the computer programmers and the technicians and the lighting and, you know, people from the whole spectrum. We employ astronomers in our programming. We don't just employ creatives. You know, we do have an extraordinary broad range of people working with us. So we make sure that people are really well looked after. And then we make sure that we run a very tight management structure, because within the creative endeavor, it's very easy to lose money. So you have to combine creativity with really tight operational management. So, for example, every single month, at the end of every month, I work closely with my chief operating officer, my finance director, and various people across the organization to get every single last detail of everything that's happening in the business into a giant board pack. And honestly, it's like a Bible. So at the end of every month, we have our board meeting, and I can open that book at any page, and I know exactly where there are 9 companies in the Arganon group. I know exactly where each of them is. And because I know the detail, I'm not worried about it. And the people who are running their individual businesses, they can see very clearly, are they where they want to be? Are they on schedule with their budget? Are there things going wrong? Do we need to nip something in the bud quickly and try something different? But by having that clarity, which is excellent management structure and detail, we can do our best work. So it is that interesting juxtaposition. And I talk about this in the flexible method, that you need to be flexible and agile in your thinking. So absolutely embrace that left side of your brain. But also you must engage the right side. You must make tough, detailed decisions. And when you've made those decisions, you must follow them through with fierce resolve and make them happen. When you've made a decision, you go for it and you make it happen. So you have to combine those two.
So tell us more about your book. What went into book? You know, what did you write? And you mentioned that there are people from North Carolina. So give us the whole scoop.
Yeah. Well, yes, I wrote the book to be useful, because there we were coming out of COVID in 2021. And actually a friend of mine said to me, listen, James, you know, you and Arganon, my business, have been managing to battle your way through these tough times. I think it could be really useful. So that gave me the thought. So I wrote 3 chapters, got an agent, and the agent said, you need to write a different chapter. So I was like, oh no, I've still got no guarantees. But I did write the other chapter, which broadened it out to include 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina and the wildfires of California and the Icelandic ash cloud, the volcanic ash cloud, and the credit crunch and other recessions and so on, looking at the whole of the last 20 years, really, and the multiple crises that we have faced. And I decided that I would, sorry, my dog again, she's squeaking at the sound of a terrible crisis, I think. I then decided that I would go and interview some people in different industries, because I wanted the book to be as broad-based as possible. I didn't want to just write it to the media industry. I wanted to write it for a broad audience. So I went out and I interviewed one of the most incredible politicians actually in the US, is the mayor of Oklahoma City. He's 40. He is the youngest mayor in the US, and he is the first Native American mayor. He's a Republican. He was obviously in the state of Oklahoma, which was Republican, and where the governor, frankly, didn't really believe in COVID, so had a particular approach to COVID. David Holt, which is his name, the mayor's name, felt fundamentally differently. He's got quite a diverse community in Oklahoma City. He's got a very strong social conscience. He cares for his people profoundly. And he decided to put quite stringent measures in place to protect his people. So he did bring about lockdowns. He did shut down bars. He did put in shelter at home, 2-meter distance, 6 feet distance, and what have you. The proof, well, it's kind of weird to say, but the proof is in the pudding. The fatality rates in Oklahoma City were amongst the lowest in the United States. Why is that? Because he was brave. He spoke his authentic self. He put his people first. He put quite stringent measures in place and followed them through with fierce resolve. And he had a low death rate in Oklahoma City. And I mean, that to me says a lot. So he was very inspiring. So he's in the book. Another really inspiring story is actually in North Carolina, where, of course, you have many hurricanes. And I reached out to the pork farming community because I wanted to have agriculture in the book. And I met the pork farming community and realized that one thing they did that really started about 20 years ago was, whereas historically they worked very independently of each other, these big farms, and they weren't really talking, and there was kind of quite a lot of competitiveness. And therefore, when giant storms came along, they were not prepared. Sometimes the animals would die, they would lose a lot of money. And they could cause quite a lot of damage sometimes because they would have giant, floods and things would happen. So what did they do? They decided to really pull together as a community. And this, again, is one other chapter. Collaborate, connect. When you reach out to your community and you collaborate with others, rather than working in competition, you can come up with systems that are going to be good for all of you. So what the pork farming community did in the Carolinas was they decided that different parts of the pork farming industry would do different things, that certain of them would look after livestock, some of them would look after the food, some of them would look after helicopters and emergency rescue. They also put in systems in place whereby they could predict heavy storms much, much earlier and therefore act more quickly and then limit the damage. So by now working together in this very collaborative way, breaking down all of those boundaries, breaking down that separation and the competitiveness, but actually coming together as a community and working and coming up with a plan and being much better prepared well in advance, they have now mitigated against the giant risks and the giant, billion-dollar losses that they used to suffer. And I just love that because I thought, well, look, even in farming, there is this lateral outside the box thinking and this collaborative spirit. So Janet Archer is my interviewee in the book, and she just really inspired me.
Wow, love that. So definitely I'm looking forward to getting your book and reading it. And I'm sure listeners are going to get your book as well, because it definitely sounds that it's packed with valuable nuggets, a lot of wisdom, insights, and real life examples. And that's the key, that if somebody else has done it, you can do it. So
absolutely.
as we come close to our show, people you can find, where can people find you, James, if they want to connect with you?
Okay, well, first of all, the book is available on Amazon.com, and I would love you to buy it. It's also available in Goodreads and through local bookstores. And I would love to get feedback, because I hope you've kind of heard now and can feel that I'm very collaborative. And I wrote the book it's my first book, and I want to hear feedback because I want to improve the book. And we're all in this together, and we can make the world a better place when we collaborate. A good place to connect is LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn and just reach out and connect. And I do a lot of public speaking. I'm very accessible. I love to hear from interesting, smart people who've got ideas. So, LinkedIn is probably a good place to reach out.
Absolutely. And you can also find James at www.theflexiblemethod.com. So, James, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Is there any last words that you'd like to tell our audience?
Well, I'm thrilled to have been invited on the show. Thank you so much. I think perhaps start, or rather end where we started, which is kindness is everything. If you have kindness for people around you, people you work with and people in your life, then you can produce remarkable change. And something I try to do every day is a small random act of kindness. It can be something very small or something big. And you don't need credit for it. You don't need people to know that you've done it. But just by doing one random act of kindness for somebody you may not have never met, you may never see again, or somebody who you love. But that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree about that. And thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us so openly. And thank you, listeners, for being with us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you, Juan, for all the technical support. Be well and take care. I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.